Hello, beautiful moms and entrepreneurs. My name is Charisse Walker, and I'm your host of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. This is a place where we come together to learn, grow, and inspire. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello, Unbreakable Mompreneurs. My name is Charisse Walker, your host, and today I'm here with Cathlene Miner. And she is so accomplished and has a huge heart in terms of what she does. And so without further ado, Cathlene, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to us.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Cathlene Miner. I am a mom of 4, a wife, and a grandmother to 3. And sometimes I just can't even believe that, because if somebody asks me how old I am, I'm not 25 anymore. So I'm 25 is what still rolls off the tongue. So I know a lot of people could probably relate to that because that's the way I am inside. Mm-hmm. And I have a nonprofit called Hopefull Handbags Global, where we help domestic abuse survivors and their children to safety, health, wellness, and long-term financial stability. So everything that we do leads to that long-term. I was a homeschool mom. My older 2, my kids range from 33, 30, 21, and 19. Homeschooled the 2 younger kids. And that kept my life very busy. So I was a stay-at-home mom for over 20 years, which is crazy too when I think about that. I mean, I did some things in between, but I was actually I was at home. That was my main job, was at home. So I appreciate you having me here today.
Well, thank you for being on. And would you agree that being a full-time stay-at-home mom actually is harder than working outside the home?
So I had both worlds, so I can talk about that. I was a supervisor at the Mayo Clinic. So those of you in the U.S. know probably about the Mayo Clinic. It's an academic medical facility. And I worked my way up to supervisor. So I was there and I was working all day. I was working 7 to 6, but on my lunch hour, I'd go sit in the car and or go for a walk. And although I was supervisor to 30 to 50 employees at a time, I wasn't emotionally attached to them in the way that you are to your children. So I could kind of leave it there. Of course, I cared. We take care of issues. The patients were my favorite, but then you would just go home. And my friends that were stay-at-home moms, I'd be thinking, come on, why are you complaining? Mm-hmm. You're at home. I'm here at work and you're at home. Not that I thought they were sitting around eating bonbons, because I had 2 kids at the time and I knew how it wasn't easy, to raise kids. So in comparing that, I found stay-at-home mom to be harder. I really did. It was a 24/7 job. And I understand I'm not saying that when you're out at work, it's not hard too. It's all hard because then you got to feel like you're separating your time. You might have mom guilt. You might have, running around and craziness. But I found emotionally and physically, it was harder work to be a stay-at-home mom.
I agree, because you get respite and you also get payoff. I was a teacher, right? So you perform in the classroom every day, and it's a college, so these people want to be here. Yeah. And you get money and you get thanks. And with your kids, they'll come and say, I love you, mom, or thank you for that. My kids are great that way. But it's a 24/7 job. And there's always stuff to be done at home. And when you leave at work, you leave it when you're not there.
Right.
Now it's okay, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. And it's never done. And let's add to that now, entrepreneurs or mompreneurs who work from home. So now you still have all the demands of being a mom because they think that you're home and they want you to do but now you're doing a business as well. And so it's hard.
It is hard because you're right. You put that other layer on, and I did that as well. So after I was a stay-at-home mom for a while, and I was a personal trainer for women for over 30 years. I'll do it off and on for fun, right? But that was still something that I did because it was a way but I always brought the kids with me, the little kids, because the other kids, and we go. But you're trying to run, even if it's a small business, you're trying to run it from home and everything else at the same time. So it's a lot more than when you're just going out to work, not just going out to work, but more because you're right. You've got the kids, they need snacks, they need this, they need that. They've got to be brought to soccer practice or all of these things. But I will say, looking back now, because all of my kids are either grown with their own families or they're in college, that I wouldn't have changed a thing because I felt so blessed, and I still do, that I was able to spend that much time, because when your kids are younger, I think we don't realize the things like my mom would say, it's going to go by fast. It's going to, yeah, okay, it is. But now that, looking back, man, that went by fast. Like, how did that even happen? And you get to know your kids only for a little while when they're little and they're with you. The rest of your life is they're adults.
Yeah.
And they're not with you, at least the majority of the time. You know what I mean? So I feel truly blessed that I was able to experience that, but not to say in it, there were some days I thought, good God, I do not know how this is going to work. I used to tease my kids. I'm like, listen, if I have to color my roots anymore, because you guys are making me gray, like, that's going to be a problem. Let's just chill, because, it's just so emotional. And I do remember one time, it was our third child, and it was a baby. And my husband came home. I'm a very patient person too, but I was done. I was tired, because I also had preteen and teenagers. So there was a long not going on. When my youngest was learning how to walk, my oldest was learning how to drive. So there was just always, I was like turning from teenager to baby and this, but I just handed him the baby when he walked in. And he looked at me like, what just happened? Like, I didn't think it was much of a stuff. Like, just, it's your turn. Like, I need a minute. But I don't think, unless you are home with your kids, I don't think you realize actually how much emotional work goes into that as well.
It's true. And I think, because I never had that opportunity to be the stay-at-home mom for the first 4 kids. Well, I would say until my twins were 10, and then things started to change because I went through a divorce, right? And so I think they were 12 by the time I got married again. I have the same two. There's a huge gap. And the oldest were 15, the youngest was a baby. And I remember for the first time I got to be a stay-at-home mom, and I had wanted that so long. And so I snapped a picture of my child. I won't get into it, but there's some connections where I knew who she was going to be like 8 years before I had her, because I knew for a fact I still had more babies. And so I snapped a picture of her where she's like, as a baby, looking at me up like this, and I'm looking down at her, and I took this picture of us. And she probably stared at me for, no joke, like 30 minutes. And I just savored that moment with her, because I never got to have the opportunity with my other 4.
Yeah.
Well, I think being able to be a mom and being able to stay home, like I can go on a field trip with my kids tomorrow that normally I wouldn't have, because we have that freedom to do what we want. But it is.
It is. But you're right. It's the flexibility. I mean, I honestly, after being a stay-at-home mom, I was like, gosh, going back to work would be tough to have a schedule. Somebody else's schedule is going to be tough for me. But I do love it now that, I'm a grandmother. I've got 3 grandkids, and being able to stop and do whatever I want to do. Like, if my daughter asks, hey, Mom, let's do that now. Can we do this? Or you have time for the girls? And I'll be like, yes. I mean, I want my answer all the time to be yes. Mm-hmm. And I love that 99% of the time I could do that, unless obviously I'm out of town or have got something scheduled. But it's really, I treasure those times more, kind of like you said, right? Because I realized, looking back too, that the older 2, I was always working. I was making ends meet. And there was a point with my older 2 when they were little, because I was married very young, and then I was a single mom of 2. So the necessities were different then, right? Like, I mean, I had bills to pay. So I worked full time, and then I cleaned houses on the weekends, and I personal trained and taught aerobics in the evenings. And so I was basically my kids were taken care of, but they were just going with me wherever we were. It was we got to do this to keep moving. We got to do this to keep moving. So I don't feel like I got to spend as much quality time with them as I did the younger 2.
Yeah, nope, it's true. So let's fast forward. You started a business because you've written a book, right?
Oh, I wrote a book, called The 30-Day Self-Perception Makeover. And I did that based on, I started thinking about these things when I was a single mom. Yeah. It was actually when I was pregnant the first time. I got pregnant. I had hyperemesis each time I was pregnant. So those of you that know what that is, it's basically when you throw up the entire pregnancy. So with the first 2, and you'll see where I'm going with this, I was on IV in the hospital most of my pregnancy.
Wow.
6-7 months at a time. I mean, meaning the first one was 7 months. The second one was sporadic, but probably a combination of 6 months. And when they sent me home, I was on IV. So I had a lot of time to think, right? And I was just starting to think, things that are going right in my life are the things that I'm excited about. And the things that aren't really working out that great are the things that I'm not that excited about. So I've got to figure something out. I mean, and back then, right, there were no cell phones. My oldest is 33. No cell phones. I mean, you got to look in the telephone book to find who you want to call. And that's what, I'm at the hospital phone by the bed. But I started thinking, I've got to start figuring this out. And I also didn't think very highly of myself. I really didn't. I noticed I loved my job, meaning I knew I had to be there. Long story short, I started saying, okay, Kath, you're going to start talking to yourself as if you'd want somebody else to talk to you. And that's kind of what started the self-perception part of it. That the base of every single thing you do starts with what you think and feel about yourself, not what anybody else thinks and feels about themselves. And for me, I think it started, in high school, I had an eating disorder. That was something that, thankfully, my parents got me help and everything else. But I was thinking, I can look like those people in the magazines, or the girl at school that looks so happy. And so for me, it was a combination of the things that were happening in my life and also a body image thing. So that's when I started to gather the ideas for that book. So I did write that book, and it's absolutely amazing. It's changed thousands of people's lives. And I started using it within my personal training when I was training people. Women is who I trained. And I would say, okay, I can help you get in the best shape on the outside. Mm-hmm. But I promise you, if we don't work on the inside too, it's not going to last long. And you're still not going to feel good. Like, you're just not. You're not going to feel at least your best for you. So that's how I wrote it. And that's how I started to test things out for myself. So I was going through it while I was working on that for those people. So yes, I wrote that book, which we actually use in the nonprofit now too, with every single survivor that comes through that we help. And that has been really good. So it's fun. I really enjoy it.
That's great. And I really think, because you and I have similar stories, because I spent 4.5 months on bed rest with my twins. And so that's the thing, but I was not in a healthy place at that point. And
right.
And there's many reasons. And so it wasn't until after I was able to break free from the first marriage that I realized, oh my gosh. And I remember going to ask permission to do something. And it wasn't even a big deal. It was like permission to go somewhere. And I turned around.
Right.
I don't have to ask permission. Like, I get to make this decision on my own. And it was crazy. It was a crazy feeling. And it was at that point that I think I realized, okay, I got some issues I got to work through. Right.
Yeah.
So I did. I wrote a book just like you in terms of relationships and getting healthy first, and then being able to move on and make sure that you know who you're marrying as well. So it's interesting.
That would be helpful for a whole lot of people, especially the ones that I work with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm here for you, not for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So now fast forward, you wrote the book, you have your own company, and now you have an organization, and you said it's international.
I do. Correct. I have an international nonprofit, and it's called Hopefull Handbags Global. It is a global organization. However, we are local, but we have spread globally. So I'll kind of just tell you a little background on how I started this and why I started it. So my mom grew up in a very abusive home. Mm-hmm. My grandfather not only abused my grandmother, but all of the kids. And there were a lot of kids. So my grandmother had 11 kids altogether. My mom was in the middle. So she was very, and she also has a very caring personality, very much of a caretaker. Mm-hmm. And we lived across the street from my grandparents, who had, my mom had siblings that were mine and my sister's age. I have one little sister. We're 15 months apart. And I started to realize that things aren't normal over there. Like, I'm not living that way across the street here. And over there, there's always a lot of yelling and fighting, and people are getting hurt. And my mom's younger siblings would come running across the street and say, Debbie, you got to come over. And so her siblings would come to my sister and I remember standing at the chain link fence, and my mom's over breaking up all the chaos, the usual stuff that goes on with domestic abuse. And it just stuck with me through the years. And I know my parents tried to protect us from that, but you kind of, what's going on. You start to put, and I was 5. That's my first recollection of it. I remember this at that age because I was just like, gosh, this isn't normal. Whatever's going on over there is not good. Because I had something to compare it to across the street. My parents were amazing. And I really feel like because of my dad, and my mom will tell you to this day, I mean, that's why she did a 180. She didn't want to raise her family that way. She did not want to be in anything like that. And my dad is just an amazing guy. And I will say, mom had me when she was 15. My dad was 17. They're still together. They are seriously the most amazing people. I am so blessed to have them as my parents. So my grandmother always had her handbag with her. She always had it with her, full of all her little things. And it got to the point where they really didn't have any funds left, any money left, because my grandfather would spend it. And so I remember going to JC Penney's with her. We'd get in the car or take the bus, because we only had one car in our family at that point. And my mom would buy my grandmother a handbag like every 6 months. It was a new handbag. And she would just always have it with her. It was like a security thing. Even the times that she did leave or try to do stuff, even after we moved away, she still brought her handbag. So I had already known of some organizations that were collecting like feminine products, putting them in the bags and handing them to the homeless. And I just thought, you know what would my grandmother have done if there was a place she could reach out to that there was no judgment at all, like zero? Would she have reached out? Now, I don't know. I mean, at this point, back then, that was a while ago. I'm 53, but she passed away over 35 years ago. Wow. Of a brain injury. Yeah. And I think you can only get hit so many times. So this is kind of how this all kind of came about. She was such a kind soul. I'm not kidding you here. Like the birds would just come land on her. Like she's just one of those people. Like, some people are just like that. And she stood 4'11", and my grandfather's 6'4". So it was just a whole bunch of, but so I thought, you know what, once I raised my kids, and I always wondered, why did my grandmother stay? I don't understand why she stayed. I didn't understand it. Doesn't make sense to me. So I went and got certified to be a domestic abuse advocate. And I learned first and foremost that there is no one reason why people stay. It is all different reasons. Every situation is different. But the one thing that always is the same is power and control. Mm-hmm. It's always about power and control. And the reason why they do it to that person is because they have worked out a way to have power and control over that person. That's why everybody else thinks most of the times, in abusive situations, even if it's, any kind of abuse. I'm not just talking about physical, any kind, right? The people on the outside typically think, gosh, what a wonderful person that is. They're so great. So we started collecting handbags. I say we, it was my mom and I was like, let's collect some handbags. Let's start to raise hope and open the conversation about domestic abuse. And at this point, I was homeschooling my two younger kids. They were like the middle school age. And so we started that. And then people just started, I put a thing on Facebook that I was collecting handbags. And then I had people messaging me back, oh, where can I drop it off? So it was mainly people that I knew. So I was like, you can drop them off at my house on my porch. And so we started filling handbags, donating them to the shelters, domestic abuse shelters. And then people were calling us. So that's still the base of what we do. We became a nonprofit in 2017. So that is still the base of what we do. We collect Once Love handbags, fill them with necessities, write an uplifting note, and we tag the bags like with our contact information that actually survivors take off and they give it to other people that might need help. So it kind of has a two-fold to it. The other fold to that tag is that when we bring them to shelters, the shelters know that we have quality checked that bag. There's nothing in there unsafe. They know we know what we can and cannot put in the bags. So then I started to have people reach out to me for other things. Basically, that's when we came up with the mission, which is obviously always safety first. We got to get them to safety, and then health, wellness, and long-term financial stability. And it really depends on when they come to us as to where we are in that realm, right? Some people are still in the situation. We got to get them out, and then you go the steps. Some people are out of the situation already, but they just can't seem to get moving and they can't seem to get going. And statistically, globally, even 85% of survivors go back because of financial reasons. Mm-hmm. So everything that we do is geared towards long-term stability. Has to be long-term sustainability. So that's how it started. And then people from other countries started reaching out, saying this is a problem here too. And also, we have since then officially collaborated with Moms in Business International, and they are an international global moms networking organization. So we've also grown some through them. So right now, Hopefull Handbags is in the United States, Canada, the Caribbean, all the islands, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Canada, and Kenya. So now we're official in Kenya. And of course, the needs are different in every culture and in almost every country. The needs are different, or the way we go about long-term sustainability and financial stability. So we have our Shine and our new programs, and it's interesting because they're acronyms. And they're the same thing we've been doing all along. But about 5 years ago, I needed to make them into something more laid out and substantial, because when you go to apply for grants or for you have to explain, made them into acronyms, and now it's easily understood. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing to look back, because now that we have the years to look back on, we can see that those people who went through the self-perception makeover, number one, which is what they think and feel about themselves, because you either go into an abusive situation with a low self-perception, you come out with one, right? Nobody's feeling like, they might feel like a weight's off their shoulder, but they're also not like, oh my gosh, I look amazing and I feel amazing. So we've got to get that base done. But it's very much about long-term sustainability. So that's how we began to be global. And how we run is any donation that is made, whether it is monetary or in kind, stays within the community that it's raised in. So if somebody's in Ireland and they donate money, that's going to Ireland. The only way that's ever different is if they say, I am donating blankety blank amount and I want it to go to this, right? If it's within our mission or within our organization, we can do that. And that's what happens mainly with the Kenya projects. So how we got started on water, we actually put in water and sanitation in Kenya, which is like, how did that come from handbags? Is because we had people there reaching out to us about the domestic abuse and the child abuse. And we had to come up with, again, our mission: safety, health, wellness, and long-term financial stability. How do we get money coming in here for you all? Like, how do we do this? And what is a need that is in your country and in your community that you can help with, that we can try to see if we can make this work for everybody? And it was, because these are the rural areas that we're dealing with here, the rural areas of Kenya, mainly in the Rift Valley. And they said, it's water. We don't have water. The schools don't have water. So that's how we started. So we're working on water, we're working on sanitation, which is biodigester toilets. And so what we do is our survivors that are not only a part of our team, but then that come into our organization that we're helping, they work. We don't send people over to do these projects. Everybody that does the projects over in whatever country they're in, they do the projects themselves. And then what they're doing also is, not only are they learning a trade, they're teaching others a trade, and now they're marketable to go and get a job. And that's how we've been working that, all while spreading the awareness and opening the conversation about domestic abuse and child abuse. And because some of the countries, the Caribbean and Kenya, I would say probably are the most that it's just historically been part of the culture for longer, or still some of the other countries, mainly first world countries. I'm not saying it's a problem everywhere, but people are talking about it more. Right. So that's what we do. And so if anything's donated in Ireland, it stays in Ireland, or it stays, everything stays there. So I think that's worth people understanding, because I think when they see that we're a global organization, they think, ooh, I don't want to give my money to that, because I want my money to stay within my country. And I get that 100%. So the people that donate to us they know that if they donate in the US, it's not going out of the US. It's going to stay here.
Wow. So how many states are you in the US?
Officially we're in 8. I say officially, meaning we've got people on the ground there, but we really do all 50. And I say that because now with the power of virtual, right? I mean, we're helping people in literally every state in the United States, where they call, and then where are they? We can work with them remotely. The thing that's the challenge everywhere is finding that safe place. If the shelters are full, or once they get out of the shelter, because shelters are temporary. You can't stay there very long. So it's finding that temporary housing, but that's even in my local area. It's a challenge, but it's one we always get over. We call things pop-up shelters, which to us are hotel rooms. So that's always our fallback. We don't want to keep anybody in a hotel room for too long, them and their kids. We've got to move on. But we really have good luck putting things out there through our own little networks behind the scenes of, does anybody know of anybody that's renting a room in their house? Does anybody know of a landlord that has an empty apartment that's willing to do a month to month for us? Because we have to get them first out of the chaos and save, and then we can reassess where do we go from here. And signing a lease usually isn't an option. There's not enough credit for that. And plus, we don't want to get them stuck in a place where they've got to stay. And most of the people, if they do have a job, they're not making enough. Now we have people that were the breadwinners of the family, and they're the ones that are there. And this happens. We probably have 50-50 of the people that we help. 50% are the breadwinners of the family, but they still don't have control over the money. Right. And then you got the other 50% who haven't worked in 20 years or 10 years. So we just meet them where they are, and we make it happen. We always say that, together we're stronger, and never underestimate the power of hope, because anything can be done. Anything can be done. That's the way I always look at it.
That is such an amazing story that I love, because it started with your little grandma that she inspired you, and then look at you have created this global organization that just is changing lives, which is just so important to me, and I love that. Congratulations.
And well, thank you. And one thing and it takes the whole team. I'm just on the team is the way I look at it. Like we're all on the team, and our team comes together and does whatever we need to do. But one thing you'll notice on our website, anything that we do, is we do not use the word violence. So you typically hear domestic violence. And the reason why we took that out back in 2018 was because when people see the word violence, they automatically assume it's physical. There's a lot of different kinds of abuse.
There is.
Right? You got psychological, you've got sexual abuse, you have financial abuse, and we can go down the whole list. So just because you're not being beaten or hit does not mean that you're not in an abusive situation. Isolation's a huge one, huge. And then because isolation typically is where it'll start. People start, family, oh, you don't need them. Oh, no, you don't need them. So
I have a family member like that too. And we were so excited they got away and they were able to see it. And then, a couple weeks later back. And I just thought,
I know, you're like, because it's from the outside looking in, and I get it. I get it. And the way I look at that is, you know what? They know we're here if they need us. They're smart people. Like, these are smart people too. Do you know what I mean? Like, some people who don't know much about this, about domestic abuse, think, gosh, did they not see that? These are good manipulators they're working with. These people are really good at what they do. So.
When did you start it? How long ago?
2017.
Wow. And it's great.
Yeah. So. It has, because it's an issue. It's a problem. And we want to solve it in a way with long-term financial stability. I think what separates us out is that we do look towards that. Our end goal is for everybody to be independent and self-sufficient. And unfortunately, what I end up seeing is that people get in the system.
Yeah.
They get in the system. They don't ever get out of the system. And while they might be safe because they keep going in the shelter and out of the shelter and in the shelter and out of the shelter, they're not moving forward. And so therefore their kids are seeing all of this. They're moving in and out. So like I said, my mom and her siblings, they were all abused as well. And so that is a huge part of our mission, is the children. So we work a lot with children, a lot with the kids. I say kids, and I'm separating out teenagers, because boy, do we work a lot with teenagers, like a lot. But they become a part of our HH family, is what we call it. Like, we're just all part of a big family. Once you're in, and everybody's checking on people and this and that. And they know that if they've got a vent and call, they can call, because I always say, I always think I've heard everything. I don't anymore, but I used to. And then I'd hear something else. I'm not surprised about anything. As bad as the things can be and unfathomable, I'm just like, okay, how do we move on from there? Like, this is where we are. And that's another thing that we do differently. We do have counselors available if someone needs it. But what we find is people digging into their past and trying to really pick things apart does not move anybody forward. It just doesn't. There's some things times that, yeah, you do have to look back, but we got to be quick about it because we're going that way. Mm-hmm. And your kids are seeing it too. So.
Do you see the pattern of abuse genetically where, because I heard that your grandma, but your mom broke free from that. She didn't.
She did. But it like, wasn't from.
I know you can't, but I think it's one of those, she just said, nope, this isn't going to happen for me. And I'm moving on. So she broke it. But
right. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, I believe it. Like they always say, right? Look at the people you surround yourself with too, that are other than family. Because unfortunately, you can't really control that all the time. But, you know, my dad had a big part in that. Big part in that. Because he's a good guy. He's a genuinely really good guy. Now, had she gotten into a relationship that wasn't healthy, she might, we don't know. Unfortunately, most of her siblings went the other way. Mm. So I think it has a lot to do with the person, the personality, and again, who you choose to hang out with. And so that's another reason why even with our survivors, when we're working with them, we'll say, you know what, if you start to get nervous and anxious, or because they do, you know, people get nervous and anxious all the time. I'm by myself. Oh my gosh, it's just me and my kid. I'm so used to the chaos. And call us first, like call one of us or our volunteers, and let's just talk through it. Because and then you can call who you want. But their first thought is, let me call Susie Q, because she's the one I usually vent to about this. And then Susie Q's on the other end, just basically ramping up the anxiety because she's feeding into it. And then there's a whole, so that's one thing that I think is so important that does start to change that dynamic in the direction people are going in, is reaching out and talking to people that can be real with it and see it from the outside looking in instead of somebody that's in it. Because if you're in it, you're going to think about it differently too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so that keeps us busy.
Yeah, it's amazing what you've accomplished. What is one piece of advice that you could give for someone that wants to start a nonprofit?
I would say if you've got a passion for it, just start doing it even before you start the nonprofit. I think some people think, oh, I've got to have all this paperwork done first. And let me tell you, it is paperwork. And it's a whole bunch of just, you send them stuff, they send it back and they say, fix this, and you send it back. It's, my husband just calls it like a paper game, right? If you can be patient with the paper game, you're going to be fine. But start doing what your passion is. Start doing it. Just start doing it, whatever it is. I mean, I'm more than happy to answer any questions of just things that I've been through, and as far as like what to do and what not to do. And it's not that hard, I guess. Like I said, to start a nonprofit, it just takes time. And if it's a really good, worthy cause, which if somebody has a passion for something that's going to help other people, it's always a worthy cause. And then it just starts to flow, because when you get the right people involved in it, and that's another thing I'll say, I'll talk to anybody about it, you've got to have the right people on the team. Like the people you surround yourself with, right? Got to be the right people on the team, and you guys have to have the same mission. You can have different ideas like that, because we love a good brainstorm, but they have to be in it for the right reasons.
Yeah, I agree. So how would someone find you? Say that maybe
they can go to CathleneMiner.com, because I have all the links on there. It's just the easiest thing. And my name, you'll have it in there. It's spelled differently. My first name and my last name is. So starts with a C, E-N-E, you know, it's just, it's one of those things when people call, when I'm telling my name to somebody, and if it has to be right, like on a form, I just start by spelling it. I don't even say it. Because they started with a K. First, it started with a K. You're never going to find me again if you put it in with a K. So, yeah. So, but I appreciate you and what people do. It really does help others to be able to connect and learn. And we're all part of one big team, I feel like. I mean, I guess I'm a mom, so I think us moms are part of one big team. And I like for people to be on the team. But going through my years with my children, that I think weren't on the team. So, but I got through some of those.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope you have a fabulous day.
You too. And moms, if you resonate where you feel like, okay, I am being abused. What do I do? Please reach out, because there is help. But if you're thinking that you want to do something and you're not quite sure, just like Cathlene said, that making sure that you follow your passion and just get started. Just take it one step at a time and go out and make it a great day. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Charisse Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Charisse Walker.